So hi, I'm Maya. At my sister Olivia's wedding, I saw her and the best man exchange a look, then slip something into my champagne like I'd never notice. I took a sip, felt instantly dizzy, and collapsed. When the hospital ran tests, what they found in my blood destroyed her perfect life. They thought I was helpless, but they had no idea I'd been documenting everything for months. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The ballroom glittered with fairy lights, crystal chandeliers, casting prism rainbows across cream-colored tablecloths and silver place settings. Soft classical music floated through the air, elegant enough to impress but quiet enough to let conversation flow. Everything about the Rosewood Hotel's grand ballroom screamed perfection, just like my sister Olivia always demanded. I smoothed down the satin of my maid of honor dress, seafoam green, a color that made my skin look sallow and my eyes dull. Not an accident, I was certain. Olivia had always been careful about being the brightest star in any constellation. Maya. Olivia's voice cut through the crowd, honeyed for the guests but with that edge I'd recognized since childhood. There you are. Come meet some of Julian's college friends. Julian, her new husband, stood surrounded by three men in identical black tuxedos, all with that same confident posture that came from old money and prestigious universities. Among them was Vince, the best man, whose eyes had followed me throughout the ceremony with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. Of course, I smiled, the expression so practiced it almost felt genuine. I'd perfected it over years of family gatherings where keeping the peace meant keeping my observations to myself. Julian pulled me into a side hug, too tight, too familiar. The other Bennett's sister, he announced to his friends. The quiet one. Olivia laughed, high and tinkling like expensive crystal. Maya works in research. Very serious business. Pharmaceutical development, I clarified, though no one had asked. Our team is actually working on champagne? Vince interrupted, suddenly appearing with two flutes. He handed one to me. With a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I took it, our fingers brushing. Something in his gaze made me hesitate. A toast, Olivia declared, raising her glass. To new beginnings. The circle raised their glasses. I brought mine to my lips. But paused when I noticed Olivia and Vince exchange a quick glance, a micro-expression most would miss. But I'd spent my life studying people, especially my sister. Something wasn't right. I pretended to sip, then excused myself to the restroom. Once alone, I examined the champagne under the bright vanity lights. No visible residue, no unusual color. But my instincts were screaming. When I returned, I intentionally set my glass down near Olivia, then stepped away to greet an elderly aunt. When I came back, I took Olivia's glass instead of mine. A small test. 20 minutes later, my vision blurred. The room began to spin, sounds becoming distant and warped. I stumbled, reaching for a chair but finding only air. The last thing I saw before blackness claimed me was Olivia's face, not concerned, but annoyed. I woke to the steady beep of a heart monitor and the antiseptic smell of hospital sheets. A nurse with kind eyes noticed me stirring. "Welcome back," she said gently. "You gave everyone quite a scare." "What happened?" My throat felt like sandpaper. "You collapsed at the wedding. They brought you in about 3 hours ago." My sister's wedding. The champagne. The look between Olivia and Vince. Did they run any tests? I asked, my researcher's mind already cataloging possibilities. The doctor ordered a standard panel, yes. He'll be in shortly to discuss the results. When the doctor arrived, his expression was grave. "Ms. Bennett, we found an unusual substance in your bloodstream. A powerful sedative that's not commonly prescribed. Combined with alcohol, it could have been extremely dangerous." My heart pounded. "You're saying I was drugged?" "It appears so. We've already notified the police. They'll want to speak with you." I wasn't surprised, not really. The signs had been there for months, the changed locks on our family lake house, the misplaced inheritance paperwork, the whispered phone calls Olivia ended when I entered a room. But drugging me at her own wedding? That was bold, even for her. The detective who arrived was a woman in her 40s with shrewd eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Detective Rivera listened carefully as I explained my suspicions. "And you believe your sister is responsible?" she asked, making notes. "Her or the best man, Vince Crawford." They exchanged a look right before he handed me the champagne. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "That's not much to go on," Detective Rivera said carefully. "I know." I hesitated, then made a decision. "But it's not the first incident." I told her about the strange episodes over the past year, the time I felt dizzy after Olivia made me tea, the unexplained rash after using a new face cream she'd given me as a gift, the food poisoning that only affected me after a family dinner she'd hosted. I started keeping samples, I admitted. The researcher in me couldn't ignore the pattern. I have them labeled and dated in my apartment. Detective Rivera's eyebrows rose. You've been collecting evidence? Call it professional curiosity. Or maybe just survival instinct. After the detective left, promising to investigate, I lay back against the pillows, exhaustion washing over me. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. Where are you? You're embarrassing me. No concern for my well-being. No questions about why I disappeared from her wedding. Just anger at my failure to fulfill my designated role in her perfect day. I didn't respond. The next morning, Dr. Chin came in with my discharge papers. The sedative has cleared your system, but you may feel foggy for another day or so. Take it easy. What exactly was it? I asked. The substance in my blood? He hesitated. A benzodiazepine derivative, but with some unusual modifications. Frankly, it's not something that should be available outside of controlled research settings. My blood ran cold. I knew exactly what he was describing, an experimental compound from my own laboratory, one we were developing for severe anxiety disorders. It was still in early testing phases, nowhere near approved for human use. Only someone with access to our lab could have obtained it. And Olivia had visited me at work just last month, insisting on a tour. I checked out of the hospital and took a cab directly to my apartment, not the one Olivia knew about, but a small studio I'd rented 6 months ago when I first started noticing things disappearing from my primary residence. Cash only, under a different name. Inside, I went straight to the hidden safe behind a loose baseboard and retrieved a leather-bound journal. Inside were meticulous notes, dates, times, symptoms, samples sealed in laboratory-grade containers. Evidence of what I'd begun to suspect was a systematic attempt to undermine my health and sanity. Next, I opened my laptop and entered a 16-digit password. A folder appeared containing audio recordings from tiny devices I'd placed in my regular apartment and my office after the third accident. Most captured nothing of interest, but a few. One recording from 2 weeks ago made my skin crawl. Olivia's voice, clear as day, speaking to someone in my living room when I was supposed to be at a conference. Once Maya's out of the picture, the entire Bennett trust transfers to me. Dad's will was specific: if either of us is deemed mentally incompatible, the other gets everything. We just need to establish a pattern of erratic behavior, memory issues, maybe a public breakdown or two. The male voice responding was unmistakably Vince. The compound I got from her lab will help with that. Small doses over time, she'll start displaying symptoms that mimic early onset dementia. No one will question it when you petition for conservatorship. They'd been planning to drug me into appearing mentally incompetent, to steal not just my inheritance but my autonomy. My hands shook as I copied the files onto a secure drive. Then I called Detective Rivera. I have proof, I said when she answered. And I know exactly what they've been doing. 2 hours later, Detective Rivera sat in my small studio, listening to the recordings and examining my journal of incidents. This is thorough, she said, flipping through pages of my precise handwriting, each entry dated and cross-referenced with samples and symptoms. I'm a researcher. Documentation is second nature. And you're certain this voice is your sister? I played another recording, Olivia on the phone, discussing with someone how they could access my lab through my key card, which had gone missing last month. That's her, I confirmed. And the man is Vincent Crawford, Julian's best man. He works for a competing pharmaceutical company. He's been trying to get information on our research for months. Detective Rivera's expression hardened. So this isn't just about your inheritance. There's corporate espionage involved. The trust is worth millions, but our research? That's worth billions. My team is close to a breakthrough on targeted anxiety treatment with minimal side effects. And your sister married Julian knowing his best friend could help her get to your research? I shook my head. I don't think Julian knows. He's just a pawn. Olivia needed a respectable husband to strengthen her image before she made her move against me. Someone who wouldn't question her sudden wealth or my convenient mental decline. Detective Rivera gathered the evidence carefully. We'll need to move quickly. If they realize you're onto them, there's no telling what they might do. After she left, I paced my small apartment, adrenaline making it impossible to rest despite the lingering effects of the drug. My phone had dozens of missed calls and texts from family members, all concerned about my episode at the wedding. The story Olivia had spun was already circulating. Poor unstable Maya, probably mixing her medications again, such a shame to ruin her sister's special day. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I called Dr. Harriet Sharma, the head of Our research division and my mentor for the past 5 years. Maya, she answered immediately. Where are you? I've been worried sick since I heard what happened. I need your help, Harriet, I said, keeping my voice steady. And I need you to trust me without asking too many questions right now. There was only a brief hesitation. Tell me what you need. Access to the lab tonight. After hours. And I need to know if anyone has been in my restricted storage in the past month. Harriet's voice dropped. Maya, what's going on? I believe someone has stolen samples of compound RT-47. And I think I know who and why. The silence on the other end stretched for several seconds. I'll meet you at the back entrance at 10 p.m. Come alone. At precisely 10 p.m., I slipped through the employee entrance of Bennett Pharmaceuticals, the company my grandfather had founded and my father had built into an industry leader. The building was quiet, most of the staff long gone for the day. Harriet was waiting by the security desk, her silver hair pulled back in its usual severe bun. Your access was temporarily suspended after the incident, she said, swiping her own badge to let me through. Hospital admittance for unexplained collapse triggered protocol. I felt a chill. Who authorized the suspension? Your sister called the board directly. Said you'd been behaving erratically, that they were concerned about your access to sensitive materials in your current state. Of course she had. Olivia was nothing if not thorough. We took the elevator to the research floor, the hum of essential equipment the only sound. In my private lab, I immediately went to the refrigerated storage unit where we kept our experimental compounds. The inventory log shows no discrepancies, Harriet said, watching me carefully. But I had a feeling, so I ran an independent count last week. We're missing approximately 50 milliliters of RT-47. Enough to dose someone repeatedly over several months. Security footage? I asked, already pulling up the system on my computer. Wiped for the relevant times. Professional job. Harriet's eyes narrowed. Maya, is this related to what happened at the wedding? I told her everything, the suspicious incidents, the recordings, my collapse, and the hospital's findings. When I finished, Harriet's face was ashen. Your own sister. She whispered. And Vince Crawford. Harriet's head snapped up. Crawford? From Nexachum? When I nodded, she swore under her breath. They've been trying to poach our researchers for years. Their anxiety medication has severe side effects they can't solve. And we're about to announce a breakthrough with none of those issues, I finished. The timing isn't coincidental. I pulled up our security protocols, looking for any other breaches. What I found made my stomach drop. Someone accessed our main server 2 days ago using my credentials. They downloaded the entire research database. For RT-47. Harriet moved beside me, fingers flying over the keyboard. The download location. She pulled up an IP address. It's registered to Nexachum's private server. We need to lock everything down, I said. Change all the access codes, secure the remaining samples. Already done, Harriet assured me. After I noticed the missing compound, I implemented emergency protocols. Only you and I have full access now. I squeezed her hand gratefully. Thank you for believing me. I've known you since you were an undergraduate, Maya. The idea that you'd be mentally incompatible is laughable. As we secured the remaining evidence of the breach, my phone rang. Detective Rivera. We've made the arrests, she said without preamble. Vincent Crawford was trying to board a private plane with research materials. Your sister was with him. I closed my eyes, relief washing over me. And the evidence? Rock solid. The recordings, the stolen research, and, this is the kicker, we found vials of the compound in your sister's wedding suite, along with detailed notes on dosing schedules. Apparently, they were planning to continue administering it to you during the family brunch tomorrow. The next morning, I sat across from my brother-in-law Julian in a quiet coffee shop downtown. His face was haggard, eyes red-rimmed from what I assumed was a sleepless night. I didn't know, he said, voice hollow. I swear to you, Maya, I had no idea what they were planning. I studied him, looking for any sign of deception. You never questioned why Olivia suddenly wanted to marry you after 15 years of friendship? Why your best man was suddenly spending so much time with your fiancé? Julian winced. I thought. He trailed off. I wanted to believe she finally saw me as more than just a friend. That it wasn't just about. He gestured vaguely. The Bennett name? The connections? The access to me? He couldn't meet my eyes. The police will want to speak with you, I said, gathering my things. If you truly knew nothing, you have nothing to fear. As I stood to leave, Julian caught my wrist. What happens now? To Olivia? I gently removed his hand. That's for the courts to decide. The charges are serious: attempted murder, corporate espionage, conspiracy. They won't be resolved quickly. And the company? Your research? We've implemented new security measures. The research continues. I paused at the door. One more thing, Julian. The divorce papers will be delivered to you by the end of the week. I suggest you sign them without contest. The media frenzy was immediate and intense. Pharmaceutical heiress drugged at sister's wedding made headlines across the country. Our company's stock initially plummeted, then rebounded when we announced that the security breach had been contained and our research remained intact. I gave no interviews, made no public statements. Instead, I focused on rebuilding, not just the security of our research, but my own sense of safety and trust. 3 months later, I sat in the courtroom as the judge delivered the sentences. Vince Crawford, 15 years for corporate espionage, attempted murder, and conspiracy. Olivia Bennett Crawford, 12 years for the same charges, with a recommendation for psychiatric evaluation. My sister didn't look at me as they led her away. I didn't expect her to. In her mind, I was still the obstacle, the one who had everything she wanted. She couldn't see that I'd earned my position through years of dedicated research, while she'd spent her life looking for shortcuts to wealth and status. After the sentencing, I declined comment to the waiting reporters and slipped out a side entrance where Dr. Sharma waited in her car. It's done, I said simply as I buckled my seatbelt. She nodded, pulling away from the courthouse. The board meeting is in an hour. Are you ready? I smoothed down my blazer, deep blue, a color that brightened my eyes and complemented my complexion. My choice, this time. More than ready. The boardroom of Bennett Pharmaceuticals was impressive, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a massive table of polished mahogany, the portraits of my grandfather and father watching over the proceedings. As the newly appointed CEO, I took my place at the head of the table. The board members, mostly men in their 60s, colleagues of my father, regarded me with expressions ranging from skepticism to grudging respect. Ms. Bennett, Harold Winters, the longest-serving member, began. In light of recent events, some of us have concerns about the direction of the company. I smiled, not the practiced smile of keeping peace, but the confident smile of someone who knows exactly what she's doing. I understand your concerns, Harold. Which is why I've prepared a comprehensive security overhaul and a 5-year plan for our research division. I slid folders across the table. You'll find that our patent application for RT-47 has been fast-tracked. Preliminary human trials show even better results than we anticipated. As they flipped through the materials, I continued. Additionally, I've secured partnerships with 3 major hospital systems for clinical implementation once we receive approval. Conservative projections show revenue increases of 32% within the first year. The room fell silent as they absorbed the information. Finally, Harold closed his folder and looked at me with new eyes. It seems we underestimated you, Ms. Bennett. Many people have, I replied evenly. It won't happen again. That evening, I returned to my new apartment, a secure penthouse with state-of-the-art security systems. As I kicked off my heels and poured a glass of wine, from a bottle I'd opened myself, I stepped out onto the balcony and looked over the city. The last year had taught me painful lessons about trust, family, and self-reliance. My sister had seen me as naive, easily manipulated, the quiet researcher who wouldn't notice the subtle signs of betrayal. She'd never understood that my silence wasn't weakness, it was observation. My kindness wasn't naivety, it was a choice. My phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Sharma, FDA meeting confirmed for next week. We're going to change millions of lives with this, Maya. I smiled into the night air. That had always been my goal, not wealth or status or power, but creating something that would help people, ease suffering, make the world better in some measurable way. Olivia had never understood that some achievements couldn't be stolen or shortcut. Some things had to be earned through years of dedicated work, through setbacks and breakthroughs, through perseverance when others might have given up. In the end, that was the fundamental difference between us. She saw other people as stepping stones to what she wanted. I saw them as fellow travelers, potential collaborators in building something greater than any of us could create alone. I lifted my glass to the city lights. To new beginnings, I whispered. Not an ending, but a fresh start. Not revenge, but reclamation. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new research, new possibilities. And this time, I was facing them not as the quiet sister, the easy target, but as a woman who had learned her own strength. Sometimes, I reflected, we find our voice only when others try to silence us. We discover our power only when facing those who would take it away. My sister's betrayal hadn't destroyed me, it had revealed parts of myself I might never have found otherwise. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in months, no longer looking over my shoulder, no longer second-guessing every interaction. The truth had come to light, justice had been served, and I had emerged not just intact, but stronger. And in the morning, I would continue the work that mattered, not because of my name or my family legacy, but because it was the purpose I had chosen for myself. A purpose no one could take from me, no matter how hard they tried. The morning after the sentencing, I woke before my alarm, the first pale light of dawn filtering through my curtains. For a moment, I lay still, letting the reality settle over me like a new skin. My sister was in prison. The company was mine to lead. The life I'd carefully built had been shattered and reassembled in the span of 3 months. I reached for my phone, no missed calls, no urgent texts, no emergencies demanding immediate attention. Just the quiet hum of a new day beginning. The silence felt unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable after months of constant crisis management. Standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse, coffee mug warming my hands, I watched the city wake up. Cars moved like blood cells through the arteries of downtown, people hurried along sidewalks, all with their own stories, their own battles, their own victories and defeats playing out in parallel to mine. My phone buzzed, Dr. Sharma. Meeting. With the patent attorneys moved to 10 a.m. Senator Wilson's office called again about the healthcare initiative. The world kept spinning. Work continued. Life moved forward, with or without Olivia in it. I dressed carefully that morning. Charcoal gray suit, crimson blouse, my grandmother's pearl earrings. Armor and inheritance, both visible and invisible. The woman who stared back from the mirror looked different somehow, same features, same dark eyes and high cheekbones, but a new steadiness in her gaze. The events of the past months had changed me, hardened some edges and softened others. At Bennett Pharmaceuticals, I moved through the research floor greeting team members by name, reviewing progress reports, stopping to examine a promising new molecular model. This was where I felt most myself, surrounded by the clean precision of science, the endless possibilities of discovery. In my office, I found a small package waiting on my desk. No return address, just my name in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a flash drive and a handwritten note, found these on Vince's personal backup server. Thought you should have them. A friend at Nexachum. I plugged the drive into a secure, isolated laptop used specifically for examining potentially dangerous files. What I found made my blood run cold, detailed dossiers on every member of my research team, psychological profiles, financial vulnerabilities, personal secrets that could be leveraged. Vince and Olivia hadn't just been targeting me, they'd been preparing to systematically dismantle my entire department if their initial plan failed. Next to my name was a comprehensive timeline dating back 3 years, every accident, every suspicious incident, methodically documented from their perspective. The calculated nature of it was chilling. They'd been testing different compounds on me, adjusting dosages, noting my reactions. Using me as their personal lab rat while simultaneously working to steal my research. The final document was the most disturbing, a detailed contingency plan titled Terminal Solution, scheduled for implementation if all other approaches failed. The clinical language couldn't disguise the intent, they had been prepared to kill me if necessary. I sat back, hands trembling slightly despite my efforts to remain clinical, detached. This wasn't just corporate espionage or sibling rivalry. Gone wrong. This was calculated, cold-blooded planning for murder. My office phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. Ms. Bennett? There's a Mr. Emerson here to see you. He says he's your father's former attorney. Gerald Emerson. I hadn't seen him since my father's funeral 2 years ago. Send him in. Gerald looked older than I remembered, hair thinner, shoulders slightly stooped, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. He carried a worn leather briefcase that I recognized from childhood visits to my father's study. Maya, he said, voice warm with genuine affection. It's good to see you in that chair. Your father would be proud. Thank you, Gerald. What brings you here? He placed the briefcase on my desk and opened it carefully. Recent events prompted me to review certain documents your father left in my care. There's something he wanted you to have, but only under specific circumstances. He withdrew a sealed envelope, yellowed slightly with age. My name was written on it in my father's distinctive handwriting. He instructed me to give this to you if Olivia ever made a serious move against you or the company. Gerald's expression was grave. I believe recent events qualify. I took the envelope, the paper rough beneath my fingertips. Did he know? The question escaped before I could stop it. Did he know what she was capable of? Gerald sighed heavily. Your father was a brilliant man, Maya. He saw patterns others missed. Olivia's tendencies concerned him greatly in his final years. After Gerald left, I sat with the unopened letter for a long time, watching the play of sunlight across its surface. Finally, I broke the seal. My dearest Maya, if you're reading this, then Gerald has determined that Olivia has made her move against you, as I feared she might. I've watched her jealousy and resentment grow over the years, despite all attempts to nurture her talents and guide her toward productive channels. What I never told either of you is that Olivia is not my biological daughter. Your mother had a brief affair before we were married. When she discovered she was pregnant, I chose to raise Olivia as my own, loving her as best I could. Your mother made me promise never to reveal this truth, believing it would devastate Olivia. Perhaps that was my first mistake. I've watched you both grow into women, and while you flourished with quiet determination, I've seen darkness grow in Olivia. A hunger that cannot be satisfied, a belief that she is entitled to what others have earned. The company is your birthright, not just by blood but by merit. You understand what Bennett Pharmaceuticals was always meant to be, not just a profitable business, but a force for healing in this world. Trust your instincts, Maya. They've always been your strength, even when you doubted them. And remember that some family is chosen, not born. With all my love and faith in you, Dad. I read the letter 3 times, each reading revealing new layers. The revelation about Olivia explained so much: her fixation on the Bennett name, her obsessive need to prove herself worthy of the legacy. It wasn't just about money or power, it was about belonging. For a moment, I felt a flicker of compassion. For her, the child who somehow sensed she was different, who never felt secure in her place. But that flicker died quickly when I remembered the coldness with which she'd planned my destruction. Understanding wasn't the same as excusing. I carefully folded the letter and locked it in my desk. This secret would die with me. Olivia had committed real crimes, she didn't need to bear the additional burden of a truth that would only cause more pain. The intercom buzzed. Ms. Bennett? Detective Rivera is here to see you. I straightened my blazer, tucking away personal revelations behind a professional mask. Send her in. Detective Rivera looked more rested than the last time I'd seen her, the intense pressure of the investigation no longer weighing on her shoulders. I wanted to update you personally, she said, declining my offer of coffee. We've connected Vincent Crawford to 3 other cases of industrial espionage across the pharmaceutical industry. Your sister appears to have been involved in at least 2 of them. I nodded, unsurprised. Were there other victims? People who were drugged? 2 researchers at Meridian Biotech reported symptoms similar to yours last year. Neither made the connection at the time. We're retesting samples from their medical records. The knowledge that others had suffered through Olivia and Vince's schemes made my stomach clench. Will they be charged with additional crimes? The DA is building the case now. It's likely they'll face additional charges. Rivera studied me carefully. How are you holding up? This can't be easy. I considered deflecting with a professional response, but something about her genuine concern broke through my carefully maintained composure. I keep waiting to feel something. Grief, maybe. Relief. Closure. But mostly I feel numb, like I'm watching someone else's life story unfold. Rivera nodded. Trauma response. Your brain is protecting you while you process everything. The feelings will come when you're ready to handle them. After she left, I canceled my remaining meetings and did something I hadn't done in months. I took the afternoon off. Not to hide or recover, but to reconnect with the parts of myself that existed outside of Bennett Pharmaceuticals, outside of being Olivia's sister or my father's daughter. I drove to the botanical gardens on the edge of the city, a place I'd loved since childhood but rarely visited anymore. The conservatory was warm and humid, alive with the scent of earth and growing things. I wandered slowly through tropical plants and desert succulents, past delicate orchids and ancient cycads. In the butterfly pavilion, I sat on a wooden bench and watched the colorful insects fluttering from bloom to bloom, their brief lives an explosion of beauty and purpose. A blue morpho landed on my outstretched hand, wings pulsing slowly. I studied its intricate patterns, the perfect evolutionary design that had developed over millions of years. This was why I'd become a scientist, not for power or prestige, but for the wonder of understanding how life worked, how chemicals became consciousness, how the right molecule could ease suffering or save a life. For the first time in months, I felt myself breathe fully, without the weight of suspicion and fear pressing against my lungs. Whatever Olivia had tried to take from me, she hadn't touched this, my capacity for wonder, for finding meaning in my work. My phone rang, breaking the moment. The butterfly startled and flew away. I almost ignored the call, but the name on the screen made me pause. Julian Crawford. Maya, his voice was strained. I'm sorry to bother you, but I thought you should know. Olivia tried to take her own life in prison last night. The world seemed to tilt slightly. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and the calculated cruelty, Olivia was still my sister. We'd shared a childhood, a home, countless moments both tender and terrible. Is she I couldn't finish the question. She's stable. They got to her in time. Julian paused. She's being transferred to the psychiatric unit for evaluation. Thank you for telling me. My voice sounded distant to my own ears. There's something else. She asked to see you. The doctors think it might help her recovery process. You don't have to, I'll go, I said, surprising myself. Not today, but soon. After we hung up, I remained in the butterfly pavilion, trying to reconcile the complexity of emotions swirling through me. Pity, anger, grief, relief, all tangled together like roots of different plants sharing the same soil. 3 days later, I sat across from Olivia in a sparse visitor's room in the prison's psychiatric wing. She looked diminished somehow, her designer clothes replaced by standard-issue garments, her carefully maintained appearance faded without access to her usual beauty regimens. Thank you for coming, she said, voice barely above a whisper. I didn't think you would. Neither did I admitted. We sat in uncomfortable silence for several minutes, years of unspoken truths hanging between us. Why? The question escaped me before I could stop it. Not why had she betrayed me, I understood the motivations of greed and jealousy. But something deeper. Why wasn't it ever enough? The privilege, the opportunities, the constant support from our parents? Olivia's laugh was hollow. Support? Is that what you call it? They supported you, Maya. They tolerated me. That's not true. Isn't it? Her eyes, so similar to mine despite our lack of shared DNA, flashed with a familiar fire. Do you know what it's like to always be the lesser sister? The pretty one, not the brilliant one. The socialite, not the scientist. To be patted on the head for planning perfect parties while you were praised for changing the world? We were both loved, I insisted, though my father's letter whispered doubts in my mind. Differently, she countered. Always differently. We lapsed into silence again. Through the barred window, I could see a small courtyard where other inmates walked in circles, like planets trapped in orbit. I didn't come here to argue about the past, I finally said. It won't change anything. Olivia studied her hands, the manicure growing out, showing the natural nail beneath the polish. A fitting metaphor, I thought. I keep thinking about that day in the treehouse, she said suddenly. Do you remember? When you fell and broke your arm. I did remember. I was 8, Olivia 11. We'd been playing in the old oak tree behind our house. You didn't tell them it was my fault, she continued. That I dared you to go higher, that I shook the branch. You were a child, I said. We both were. But that's when I knew. Her voice grew softer. That you were better than me. Not smarter or prettier or more talented. Just better. In the ways that matter. I didn't know how to respond to that. Compliments from Olivia had always been rare, usually wielded like weapons or used as manipulation. I'm not asking for forgiveness, she said, meeting my eyes directly. I don't deserve it. But I needed you to know that I see it now, what I tried to destroy. And I'm sorry isn't enough, is it? No, I agreed. It's not. When our time was up, I stood to leave. Olivia remained seated, something fragile and unfinished in her expression. Will you come again? She asked, vulnerability naked in her voice. I paused at the door. I don't know. I need time. Outside the prison, I sat in my car for a long time, hands gripping the steering wheel, forehead resting against the cool leather. The conversation replayed in my mind, each word examined for truth, for manipulation, for the seeds of healing or further harm. My phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Sharma, FDA meeting confirmed for tomorrow. All systems go. Life continued. The world didn't stop for personal reckonings or broken family bonds. There was work to do, important work that could help countless people. I started the car and drove back toward the city, toward the future I was building from the ruins of betrayal. Olivia had tried to define me by her perception, to contain me within the box of little sister, to diminish me until I disappeared. Altogether. But in trying to erase me, she had instead forced me to define myself more clearly than ever before, not as a Bennett, not as a sister, but as Maya. A scientist. A leader. A woman who had faced betrayal and emerged stronger, clearer. About her purpose. The next morning, I stood before the FDA review board, presenting the results of our clinical trials for RT-47. The data was compelling, significant reduction in anxiety symptoms with minimal side effects, effective in cases resistant to traditional treatments. Ms. Bennett, one of the reviewers said, these results are remarkable. How soon could you begin wider implementation if approved? We're prepared to begin production immediately, I replied. Our facilities are already configured. And we've established distribution partnerships with major hospital systems nationwide. As I walked them through the logistics, I felt a sense of rightness, of purpose fulfilled. This was what the company was meant for, not power plays or corporate espionage, but creating solutions to human suffering. After the meeting, Dr. Sharma squeezed my arm. They were impressed. Approval is practically guaranteed. I smiled, genuinely happy for the first time in months. Let's celebrate. The whole team deserves it. That evening, we gathered at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the city. 20 brilliant minds who had worked tirelessly through the chaos of the past months, staying focused on the science even as corporate drama swirled around them. I raised my glass, sparkling water, not champagne. Some lessons stay with you. To all of you, who never lost sight of why we do this work. The headlines focused on scandal and betrayal, but the real story was always here, in the research that will help thousands of people reclaim their lives from debilitating anxiety. As glasses clinked and conversation flowed around me, I stepped away to the edge of the rooftop, looking out over the city lights. A gentle breeze carried the scent of distant rain. Dr. Sharma joined me, her silence comfortable, undemanding. I visited Olivia yesterday, I said finally. She nodded. Not surprised. How was it? Confusing. Painful. Necessary, maybe. I turned to face her. She tried to destroy everything I've built, everything we've built together. And part of me still cares what happens to her. Is that weakness? That's humanity, Harriet said simply. Compassion isn't the same as forgiveness, and neither one means forgetting. Behind us, laughter rose from the table, my team, my chosen family, celebrating a victory earned through integrity and perseverance. The contrast with Olivia's lonely hospital room couldn't have been starker. You know, Harriet continued, in all my years in this industry, I've seen brilliant minds destroyed by ego, by greed, by the need to be recognized as the best. But the truly exceptional ones, like you, Maya, they're driven by something else entirely. Curiosity, I supplied. The need to understand. And to help, she added. Never underestimate how rare that combination is. The celebration continued late into the night, but I slipped away earlier than most, needing time alone to process the day, the week, the months that had transformed my life so completely. In my apartment, I stood at the window watching the city below, thinking about paths taken and not taken, about choices that define us and the people who shape our understanding of ourselves. Olivia had tried to write my story for me, cast me as the naive sister, the obstacle to be removed, the stepping stone to what she really wanted. She never understood that I was writing my own story all along, chapter by chapter, discovery by discovery. The betrayal had wounded me deeply, but it hadn't defined me. If anything, it had clarified what truly mattered, the work, the impact, the people whose lives would be better because we refused to give up on finding solutions. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new questions to answer, new problems to solve. But tonight, I allowed myself to feel the quiet triumph of remaining true to my purpose despite everything that had tried to derail me. Sometimes the most powerful response to those who try to diminish you isn't revenge or resentment, but simply becoming more fully yourself, pursuing your path with such clarity and conviction that their attempts to define you become irrelevant. Olivia had tried to take everything from me. Instead, she had inadvertently pushed me to claim it more fully than ever before. 6 months after the FDA approval of RT-47, I stood at the podium in the grand ballroom of the Haverford Hotel, looking out at a sea of expectant faces. Medical professionals, research scientists, investors, and media representatives had gathered for the official launch of what industry publications were already calling the most significant advancement in anxiety treatment of the decade. The spotlight was warm on my face as I adjusted the microphone. Good evening. Thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate not just a new medication, but a new beginning for millions of people suffering from treatment-resistant anxiety disorders. From the corner of my eye, I could see Dr. Sharma in the front row, nodding encouragingly. Beside her sat the research team, brilliant minds who had persevered through controversy and chaos to bring this breakthrough to fruition. Many of you know the personal challenges that accompanied the development of RT-47, I continued, acknowledging without dwelling on the scandal that had made headlines for months. But tonight isn't about the obstacles we faced. It's about the people whose lives will change because we refuse to let those obstacles define our work or our purpose. The screen behind me displayed testimonials from the clinical trials, a college student who could finally sit through exams without debilitating panic attacks, a veteran who slept through the night for the first time in years, a surgeon whose career had been saved when his tremors disappeared. These are the stories that matter, I said, my voice steady and clear. These are the reasons we push boundaries in science and medicine. Not for acclaim or profit, but for impact. After the presentation, as guests mingled and champagne flowed, I found myself approached by a thin woman in her 50s, her posture hesitant yet determined. Ms. Bennett, she said quietly, I don't know if you remember me. I'm Eleanor Winters, Harold's wife. Harold Winters, the board member who had doubted me, who had secretly supported Olivia's attempts to discredit me before the evidence became too overwhelming to ignore. Of course, I replied, professional courtesy masking any surprise. It's good to see you, Eleanor. I wanted to thank you personally. Her eyes filled unexpectedly with tears. Our grandson started the trial program last month. He's 16. Before RT 47, he couldn't leave his room most days. Now he's talking about college. Something tightened in my chest, not pain, but a profound sense of purpose fulfilled. I'm very glad to hear that, Eleanor. Harold was wrong about you, she added, her voice barely above a whisper. He knows that now. Before I could respond, she squeezed my hand and disappeared into the crowd, leaving me with the realization that true vindication comes not from proving critics wrong, but from creating something so undeniably valuable that previous judgments become irrelevant. Later that evening, as the event wound down, Dr. Sharma found me on the terrace overlooking the city lights. Quite a triumph, she said, joining me at the railing. The first orders are already exceeding projections by 30%. Hospitals can't get it fast enough. I nodded, satisfaction warming me more than the champagne I'd barely touched. We need to ensure production keeps pace. Quality can't be compromised by demand. Always the scientist, Harriet smiled. Even on a night when most would be celebrating their personal vindication. That's not what matters, I said simply. And that, Maya, is precisely why you're the right person to lead this company. She studied me thoughtfully. Your sister never understood that, did she? That building something meaningful is more satisfying than any amount of status or revenge. The mention of Olivia sent a familiar pang through me, not quite grief. Not quite anger, but a complex emotion I hadn't fully named yet. Have you visited her again? Harriet asked gently. Twice, I admitted. She's been transferred to a minimum security facility with a robust psychiatric program. The doctors say she's making progress. And what do you say? I considered the question carefully. I think she's finally confronting herself without the distractions of social status or external validation. Whether that's progress depends on what she does with those insights. Harriet nodded, understanding the complexity behind my measured response. And Julian? Divorced, as of last month. He's moved back to Boston. I think he's trying to rebuild his life away from the shadow of what happened. And you, Maya? Are you rebuilding too? I looked out at the cityscape, lights twinkling like earthbound stars. I'm building, Harriet. Not rebuilding. Something new, something entirely my own. The next morning, I woke to news alerts flooding my phone. A major pharmaceutical conference in Geneva had featured a panel discussion about RT-47, with medical experts hailing it as a potential game-changer for psychiatric treatment. Our stock had jumped 15% overnight, and interview requests were pouring in from medical journals and mainstream media alike. In my office by 7 a.m., I scrolled through emails while my assistant, Marcus, briefed me on the day's schedule. The 60 Minutes team confirmed for next Wednesday. They want to film here and at the main lab. Also, the governor's office called about the Innovation Award ceremony next month, and there's a Dr. Eliza Kwan from Singapore General Hospital who's particularly eager to speak with you about implementing RT-47 in their anxiety clinic. I nodded, making mental notes. Schedule Dr. Kwan first. The media can wait, doctors treating patients are the priority. One more thing, Marcus added, his tone shifting slightly. There's a letter that came through personal channels, not the regular mail. Security scanned it, it's clean. He handed me a cream-colored envelope, expensive stationery with my name handwritten on the front. I recognized the penmanship. Immediately, our mother's elegant, flowing script. Thank you, Marcus. That's all for now. When he left, I turned the envelope over in my hand several times before opening it. My mother and I hadn't spoken since Olivia's arrest. She'd retreated to her villa in the south of France, declining comment to the press and ignoring my attempts at contact. Inside was a single sheet of the same heavy paper, covered in my mother's handwriting. My dearest Maya, first, I must ask your forgiveness for my silence these past months. The truth is, I simply did not know what to say or how to face what Olivia had done, not just to you, but to our family name and legacy. I've spent these months in deep reflection about my role in shaping both my daughters. I see now how I favored Olivia, perhaps out of guilt over her parentage, perhaps because her neediness seemed to demand more attention than your self-sufficiency. In trying to compensate for one secret, I created another wound. Your father would be immensely proud of what you've accomplished, both professionally and personally. The dignity with which you've handled this tragedy speaks volumes about your character. I am returning to the States next week and would very much like to see you, if you are willing. There is much I need to say in person. With love and profound admiration, Mother. I set the letter down, emotions swirling like leaves caught in an autumn wind. Part of me wanted to refuse the meeting, to protect myself from further family complications. But another part, perhaps, the scientist in me, was curious about what insights my mother might offer, what pieces of the puzzle she might provide. I texted Marcus, please arrange a private dinner with my mother next Tuesday. Later that afternoon, I sat in the glass-walled conference room with our research leadership team, discussing the next phase of our work. RT47 success gives us significant leverage for the pediatric anxiety program, Dr. Chen was saying, gesturing to the projected data. Early results in adolescents are extremely promising. We need to move carefully there, I cautioned. Additional safety protocols, extended observation periods. Children aren't just small adults when it comes to neurochemistry. That's why we've partnered with Children's Memorial for the next trial phase, Dr. Sharma added. Their pediatric psychiatry department is unparalleled. As the discussion continued, I found myself studying the faces around the table, brilliant minds united by a common purpose, people who had chosen to build rather than destroy, to heal rather than harm. The contrast with Olivia and Vince's path couldn't have been starker. My phone vibrated with a text from Detective Rivera, need to discuss new developments. Can I stop by your office today? A ripple of concern passed through me. I excused myself from the meeting and called her immediately. What's happened? I asked without preamble when she answered. Nothing alarming, she assured me. But we've uncovered additional evidence you should be aware of. Preferably in person. She arrived an hour later, carrying a sealed evidence folder. After declining coffee, she got straight to the point. During a secondary search of Vincent Crawford's cloud storage, we found encrypted communications dating back 5 years. It appears the plan to target you specifically began much earlier than we thought, and it wasn't initially Olivia's idea. She opened the folder and pushed several printed emails across my desk. Vincent approached your sister, not the other way around. He'd been monitoring your research for years, recognized its potential value before anyone else. I scanned the emails, feeling a chill despite the warm office. The earliest messages showed Vincent carefully cultivating a relationship with Olivia, subtly exploiting her insecurities about her place in the family and the company. He groomed her, I said quietly. Rivera nodded grimly. Psychologically manipulated her, yes. Played to her existing resentments and gradually normalized increasingly unethical behaviors. Why tell me this now? 2 reasons. First, it may affect how the prosecution proceeds with certain charges. Second, she hesitated, I thought it might help you personally. Understanding the full context. After she left, I stood at my office window, watching clouds cast moving shadows across the city below. The new information didn't excuse Olivia's actions. She was an adult who had made her choices, but it added layers to my understanding of how things had unraveled so completely. Vincent had seen her vulnerability and exploited it with surgical precision, knowing exactly which buttons to push, which wounds to reopen. He'd recognized in her the perfect combination of ambition, insecurity, and proximity to what he wanted. That evening, I canceled my dinner plans and drove to a small park near the river, a quiet spot where my father used to take us for Sunday picnics when we were children. I sat on a weathered bench, watching joggers and dog walkers pass by as the sun sank toward the horizon. A memory surfaced, Olivia at 10 years old, proudly showing our father a science project she'd worked on for days. His distracted praise as he glanced at it briefly before returning to his newspaper. The flash of hurt in her eyes, quickly masked with practiced indifference. Another memory followed, Olivia at 16, deliberately borrowing my prom dress. Without asking, then returning it with a wine stain. Not an accident, I'd known even then, but a small, deliberate wound. The pattern had been there all along, her need for validation colliding with her resentment when it wasn't given, the small cruelties that escalated over time. Vincent had simply recognized the pattern and weaponized it. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, it's Julian. Got your number from your assistant. Can we talk? It's important. I hesitated, then responded, Plaza Hotel lobby, 8 p.m. Julian was already waiting when I arrived, sitting tensely in a corner of the elegant lobby, a cup of untouched coffee on the table before him. He stood when he saw me, uncertainty in every line of his body. Thank you for meeting me, he said. As I sat across from him. You said it was important. I kept my tone neutral, professional. He nodded, running a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I remembered from the early days of his relationship with Olivia. I've been going through our old place, clearing out the last of my things. I found something I think you should have. He slid a small USB drive across the table. It's a video Olivia recorded the night before our wedding. Before everything happened. She never meant for anyone to see it, especially you. I looked at the drive without touching it. Why give this to me now? Julian sighed, the weight of the past year evident in the new lines around his eyes. Because I'm trying to make amends in whatever small ways I can. Because I truly didn't know what they were planning, but I should have seen the signs. And because... He paused, because I think it might help you understand some things. Understand or forgive? I asked sharply. That's not for me to say. He stood, leaving the drive on the table between us. Do with it what you will. I won't contact you again. Back in my apartment, I stared at the USB drive for a long time before plugging it into my laptop. The video file opened immediately, Olivia sitting at her vanity in a silk robe, her wedding dress hanging behind her. She looked nervous, unlike her usual confident self. I don't know why I'm recording this, her voice was slightly slurred. Perhaps from alcohol or nerves. Maybe as evidence that I knew exactly what I was doing. Maybe as a confession. She took a sip from a glass of wine, her hand trembling slightly. Tomorrow I marry Julian, and everyone will smile and celebrate. Never knowing it's all a calculated move in a longer game. Julian's a means to an end. Just like this wedding. Just like everything else. She laughed, a hollow sound. Maya will be there, of course. Perfect Maya with her perfect mind and her perfect future. She'll smile and give a beautiful toast. Completely unaware that I've been planning her downfall for years. Another sip of wine, longer this time. The funny thing is, I don't even hate her. Not really. I envy her. She never had to try so hard, never had to prove she belonged. Everything came naturally to her, dad's approval, academic success, respect from everyone who matters. Olivia's expression shifted, vulnerability breaking through the bitterness. Sometimes I wonder who I'd be if I hadn't spent my life competing with a sister who never even knew we were in a competition. If I'd built something of my own instead of plotting to take what's hers. She shook her head, as if dismissing the thought. Too late for that now. The plan is in motion. This time next year, everything will be different. Maya will be gone. Not dead, just diminished. Discredited. And I'll finally have what should have been mine all along. She leaned closer to the camera, her eyes red-rimmed but determined. If you're watching this, Maya, somehow, someday, know that it wasn't personal. Well, it was, but not in the way you might think. It wasn't about you. It was about me. Always. About me. The video ended abruptly, Olivia's face frozen in a complex expression, part defiance, part despair. I closed my laptop, emotions churning. The Olivia in that video wasn't a master manipulator or a cold-blooded criminal. She was a broken person making terrible choices, trapped in patterns of resentment and insecurity that had calcified over decades. Understanding this didn't erase what she'd done or magically heal the wounds of betrayal. But it shifted something. In my perception, not toward forgiveness, exactly, but toward a more complete truth. The next morning, I called Dr. Linden, the psychiatrist I'd been seeing since the events at the wedding. I need to process some new information, I explained. It's complicated my feelings about everything. I have an opening at noon, she offered. In her calm, sunlit office, I shared the emails Detective Rivera had shown me and described Julian's video without showing it. It seems you're getting pieces of a more complex picture, Dr. Linden observed after listening carefully. How does that affect your understanding of what happened? I considered the question. It doesn't excuse anything. But it helps me see the whole situation less as a simple story of betrayal and more as a tragedy with multiple causes. Multiple failures. Including whose failures? She asked gently. My parents, for the dynamics they created. Vincent, for his calculated exploitation. Olivia, for her choices. And maybe even mine, for not seeing what was happening sooner. Dr. Linden shook her head. Be careful about assuming responsibility for others' actions, Maya. Understanding context doesn't mean accepting blame that isn't yours. I know, I sighed. But I keep thinking about all those small moments over the years, the competitions I didn't know we were having, the resentments building beneath the surface. Could I have changed the trajectory if I'd been more aware? Perhaps. Or perhaps not. The question now is what you do with this understanding moving forward. That question stayed with me throughout the day, through meetings and conference calls, through lab visits and financial reviews. What did I want to do with this new, more nuanced understanding of the past? The answer came unexpectedly, during a visit to one of the clinics implementing RT-47 treatment. I was observing a group therapy session where patients discussed their experiences with the medication. Before, my anxiety was like this voice constantly telling me I wasn't good enough, would never be good enough, a woman in her 30s explained. RT-47 doesn't silence that voice completely, but it lowers the volume enough that I can hear my own thoughts again. I can challenge those beliefs instead of just accepting them as truth. Her words resonated deeply, connecting to something fundamental about Olivia's experience, that internal voice of inadequacy that had driven her destructive choices, that had been exploited by Vincent's manipulation. What if there was a way to use our research not just to treat the symptoms of anxiety and other disorders, but to address the root psychological patterns that made people vulnerable to manipulation and self-destructive behaviors in the first place? That evening, I called an emergency meeting with Dr. Sharma and our core research team. I want to propose a new direction for our next major research initiative, I began, outlining my vision for an integrated approach that combined pharmaceutical interventions with targeted psychological therapies. We've proven we can moderate the neurochemical aspects of anxiety, I explained. Now I want to explore how we can help people rewrite the underlying narratives that drive destructive patterns. Not just treating symptoms, but addressing root causes. Dr. Sharma's eyes lit up with the spark of scientific curiosity I'd always admired. A holistic approach that bridges neuropharmacology and cognitive psychology. Ambitious, but potentially revolutionary. It would require partnerships outside our traditional realm, Dr. Chen noted. Psychological researchers, therapy practitioners. Exactly, I nodded. We'd be creating a new paradigm that transcends current treatment models. As the discussion continued, ideas building upon ideas with the energetic flow of true innovation, I felt something unlock inside me, a sense of purpose even clearer and more powerful than before. This wasn't about Olivia anymore, or even about my response to what she'd done. This was about transforming a painful personal experience into something that could help countless others break free from their own destructive patterns. Later that night, I sat at my desk at home, making notes for the new research initiative. My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Rivera. Thought you should know, Olivia has agreed to testify against Vincent in exchange for reduced charges. She's providing details about other companies he targeted. I set the phone down, absorbing this new development. Olivia was cooperating, perhaps finally breaking free from Vincent's influence, perhaps simply making another calculated move to benefit herself. Either way, it represented change, a deviation from the destructive path she'd been following. Outside my window, the city lights twinkled against the dark sky. Somewhere in that landscape of millions of lives were people suffering as Olivia had suffered, trapped in patterns of inadequacy and resentment, vulnerable to manipulation, capable of causing great harm to themselves and others. And somewhere in my lab notebooks and research data might be the keys to helping them find healthier paths forward. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed me had instead opened doors to new understanding, new possibilities, new ways to fulfill the purpose that had always driven me, easing suffering, solving problems, making the broken whole again. Not through revenge or resentment, but through the patient, persistent work of science and healing. Not by dwelling on past wounds, but by transforming them into wisdom that could serve others. In that moment, I understood something profound about resilience. It isn't just about surviving difficulty, but about allowing it to evolve you into someone stronger, wiser, and more compassionate than you were before. 3 years after the wedding that changed everything, I stood at the entrance of the Lakeside Psychiatric Rehabilitation Center, autumn leaves crunching beneath my feet. The facility was nothing like the stark institution I'd imagined when Olivia was first transferred. Here, instead, modern buildings nestled among trees ablaze with fall colors, walking paths winding between gardens designed for healing. I signed in at the reception desk, the process now familiar after 2 years of monthly visits. Not obligation or penance, but a deliberate choice I'd made after launching our integrated treatment program. She's in the East Garden, the receptionist told me with a warm smile. Having a good day, from what I hear. I nodded my thanks and followed the stone path around the main building. The air was crisp with the promise of winter, scented with pine and wood smoke from a nearby fire pit where patients gathered for outdoor therapy sessions. Olivia sat alone on a bench beneath a maple tree, its leaves a brilliant crimson canopy. Above her, she wore simple clothes now, jeans, a soft sweater, practical shoes. Her hair, once highlighted and styled weekly at exclusive salons, was its natural brown, pulled back in a simple ponytail. She was sketching something in a notebook, completely absorbed until my footsteps on the gravel alerted her to my presence. "Maya," she said, looking up with a small smile. Not the dazzling social smile she'd once wielded like a weapon, but something quieter, more genuine. "I wasn't sure you'd come today." I said I would. I sat beside her, leaving comfortable space between us. "The symposium in Chicago ended early." She nodded, closing her sketchbook. "How did your presentation go?" "Better than expected. The data from the integrated treatment program is compelling enough that 3 major research hospitals want to implement pilot programs. That's wonderful. The pride in her voice seemed sincere. The one that combines medication with targeted therapy, right? Yes. We're seeing 72% of patients reporting significant improvement in not just symptoms, but underlying thought patterns. Olivia was quiet for a moment, watching a robin hop along the path before us. I've been using some of those techniques in my therapy here. The cognitive restructuring especially. I studied her profile, noting the new lines around her eyes, the relaxed set of her shoulders that had once been perpetually tense with ambition and insecurity. 3 years in treatment had changed her, as had her testimony against Vincent, which had resulted in additional charges against him and several associates. Your doctor mentioned you've been helping with the group sessions for new patients, I said. She nodded. It helps me as much as them, I think. Articulating the patterns makes them easier to recognize. She turned to face me directly. The story I told myself about you, about us, for so many years. I can see now how distorted it was. How I twisted everything to fit a narrative where I was always the victim, always justified in my resentment. I'd heard variations of this realization before, watching it evolve over months of visits from initial defensiveness to genuine insight. The process had been neither quick nor linear, with setbacks and resistance along the way. The new art therapy program seems to be working for you, I observed, nodding toward her sketchbook. She smiled, a flash of her old self-consciousness crossing her face. I'm terrible at it, actually. But Dr. Coleman says it's not about creating something beautiful, it's about expressing what words can't reach. She hesitated, then opened the sketchbook to a page filled with swirling colors, dark blues and purples giving way to lighter shades at the edges. This is how I visualize what happened. The darkness at the center is where I was then, consumed by jealousy and fear. The lighter edges are possibility. What might come next? I studied the image, touched by its raw honesty. It's powerful. Maya, she said quietly, I know I've said this before, but I need to say it again. I'm sorry. Not just for what I did, but for who I was, someone so trapped in her own distorted perspective that she could justify harming her sister. In the early days of her treatment, these apologies had felt rehearsed, strategic, another manipulation to improve her situation. Now, 3 years later, there was a depth to her remorse that resonated as genuine. I know, I said simply. We sat in silence for a while, watching the autumn light filter through leaves above us. Not comfortable exactly, but not tense either, a different kind of silence than we'd ever shared before. I heard about Mom's foundation work in France, Olivia said eventually. The scholarship program for young women in STEM. That's your influence, isn't it? I nodded. After our reconciliation 2 years ago, my mother had dedicated herself to making amends in her own way, establishing programs that embodied values she'd once overlooked in her younger daughter. She's trying, I said. We all are. Later, as I prepared to leave, Olivia walked me to the entrance. My review board is next month, she said, a hint of nervousness in her voice. Dr. Coleman thinks they might approve transitional release. Part-time community living with continued treatment here. That's significant progress, I said, genuinely pleased for her. The woman before me was so different from the one who had plotted my destruction, softer edges, clearer eyes. A humility that had never been part of her character before. I won't be returning to the industry, she added quickly, as if anticipating concerns. That chapter is closed. I'm actually considering continuing education in counseling, using my experience to help others avoid the same pitfalls. As we said goodbye, there was an awkward moment, not quite a hug, not quite a handshake, but something in between. The physical manifestation of our new relationship, neither the false closeness of before nor complete estrangement, but something tentative and authentic. Driving back to the city, I reflected on the long, complex journey that had brought us both to this point. 3 years ago, I couldn't have imagined sitting peacefully beside the sister who had tried to destroy me. I couldn't have imagined finding value in maintaining any connection to her. Yet here we were, not pretending the past hadn't happened, but finding a way forward that acknowledged both the harm done and the possibility of growth. My phone rang through the car's speakers. Dr. Sharma. Maya, I just received the preliminary data from the adolescent trials. The results are even better than we projected. Can you come in? On my way, I replied, redirecting my route toward the research campus. The Integrated Neurocognitive Treatment Center occupied what had once been a separate subsidiary building of Bennett Pharmaceuticals. Now it housed both our research facilities and treatment spaces where patients participated in clinical trials combining pharmaceutical intervention with innovative therapy protocols. Dr. Sharma met me in the conference room, tablets of data spread before her, excitement evident in her posture. "Look at these response rates," she said, pulling up charts on the main screen. 87% of adolescent patients showing significant improvement not just in anxiety symptoms, but in cognitive restructuring metrics. I studied the data, a familiar thrill of scientific discovery warming me from within. The younger patients are demonstrating more neuroplasticity, more capacity for rewiring harmful thought patterns. Exactly. And the combination approach is showing synergistic effects beyond what either intervention achieves alone. We spent the next 2 hours analyzing the results, identifying patterns, discussing implications for the next phase of research. This was what had always driven me, not accolades or status, but the tangible impact of discovery, the potential to transform suffering into healing. As evening approached, I walked through the treatment wing where clinical trials were conducted. Through observation windows, I could see therapy sessions in progress, patients working with specialized counselors trained in our protocols, learning to recognize and rewire the thought patterns that had kept them trapped in cycles of anxiety and fear. In one room, a teenage girl sat with her therapist, practicing mindfulness techniques designed to complement the neuropharmacological effects of a modified version of RT-47. Her face was relaxed, focused, so different from the panic-stricken expression documented in her intake photos. This was the true victory that had emerged from the ashes of betrayal. Not my professional success or Olivia's redemption journey, but the countless lives being transformed by innovations that might never have existed if I hadn't been forced to understand the deeper mechanics of manipulation and psychological vulnerability. Back in my office, I found a package waiting on my desk, a book with a handwritten note from Dr. Coleman, Olivia's therapist. "Maya, thought you might be interested in Olivia's contribution to this new volume on psychological manipulation and recovery. Her chapter on recognizing vulnerability to exploitation has already been noted by several colleagues as exceptionally insightful. With appreciation for your continued support of her healing journey, Dr. Coleman." I opened the book to Olivia's chapter, titled "The Invisible Wounds: How Unrecognized Trauma Creates Vulnerability to Manipulation." The dedication page read simply, "For my sister, who showed me that true strength lies not in power over others, but in the courage to heal." Reading her words, clinical yet deeply personal, analyzing her own psychology with ruthless honesty, I felt a complex emotion that defied simple categorization. Not forgiveness exactly, not pride, but a recognition of how far we'd both traveled from that terrible wedding day. The intercom buzzed, interrupting my thoughts. "Ms. Bennett? Julian Crawford is here. He says he has an appointment." I took a deep breath, centering myself. "Send him in." Julian entered cautiously, 3 years older and considerably humbler than the man who had stood by while his wife and best friend plotted against me. He carried a leather portfolio and wore a simple suit, no tie. "Thank you for seeing me," he said, remaining standing until I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Your message said it was important," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. We hadn't spoken since he'd given me the USB drive with Olivia's confession. He nodded, opening the portfolio. "I've spent the past 2 years developing something I think might interest you professionally." He handed me a prospectus titled "Early Intervention Program for At-Risk Youth, Identifying and Addressing Vulnerability to Manipulation." "You're working in prevention now?" I asked, genuinely surprised. After everything that happened, I needed to make sense of it, to find some way to create good from all that harm. He hesitated. "I went back to school, got my master's in educational psychology. This program identifies kids who show the same patterns Olivia and Vince exhibited early on, the ones who might become either victims or perpetrators of manipulation." I skimmed the materials, impressed despite my lingering wariness. The program was thoughtfully designed, evidence-based, with clear protocols for implementation in school settings. "Why bring this to me?" I asked. "Your integrated treatment approach is revolutionizing how we understand the intersection of neurochemistry and psychological patterns. This program could be the preventative complement to your therapeutic work." He leaned forward, earnest in a way I'd never seen during his marriage to my sister. "I'm not asking for funding or endorsement. Just your professional opinion on whether this approach has merit." I studied him, looking for hidden agendas or manipulation, finding only nervous sincerity. "I'll review it properly and give you my honest assessment." Relief washed over his features. "That's all I'm asking. Thank you." After he left, I sat with the prospectus, thinking about cycles of harm and healing, about how trauma ripples outward through lives and relationships, and how those ripples might be redirected toward growth instead of destruction. My phone buzzed. With a calendar reminder, dinner with Dr. Chen and the research team to celebrate the promising trial results. I gathered my things, placed Julian's materials in my bag for later review, and headed out. The restaurant was warm and lively, a welcome contrast to the intensity of the day. As our team settled around a large table, conversation flowing easily between scientific discussion and personal updates, I felt a deep sense of belonging. These people, brilliant, dedicated, compassionate, had become my chosen family. Bonds formed through shared purpose rather than shared DNA. Dr. Chen raised his glass. To Maya, whose vision made all of this possible. I shook my head, deflecting the praise. To all of us, and to the patients whose lives will change because of our collective work. Later, as dessert was served, Dr. Sharma leaned closer. You seem contemplative tonight. Everything all right with your sister? I nodded. She's making real progress. May even begin transitional release soon. And how do you feel about that? The question gave me pause. How did I feel about Olivia's incremental steps toward freedom, toward a new life? Cautiously optimistic, I said finally. For her, and for myself. For the possibility that healing isn't just a concept we apply to patients, but something we can actually experience ourselves. Harriet squeezed my hand briefly. That's the most important discovery of all, isn't it? After dinner, I declined offers to share a ride, choosing instead to walk a few blocks in the cool evening air to clear my head. The city pulsed around me, people rushing home from work, couples entering restaurants, lives unfolding in countless variations. 3 years ago, walking alone at night would have triggered paranoia, hypervigilance, the constant fear that Olivia or Vincent might make another attempt to harm me. Now, I moved through the world differently, aware but not afraid, changed but not defined by what had happened. Near the entrance to my building, a small street fair had appeared, local artisans selling handcrafted items, musicians playing acoustic guitars, the scent of cinnamon and sugar in the air. On impulse, I wandered through the stalls, enjoying the simple pleasure of being present in the moment. At one booth, an artist created intricate glass sculptures, delicate yet surprisingly strong. One piece caught my eye, a clear glass phoenix rising from swirls of blue and purple, its wings catching the light in prismatic patterns. It's a symbol of transformation, the artist explained, noticing my interest. How we can emerge from our darkest moments renewed, even more beautiful than before. I bought the sculpture, carrying it carefully home. In my apartment, I placed it on the windowsill where morning light would bring it to life each day, a tangible reminder of the journey from darkness to something unexpected and luminous. My phone chimed with an email notification from Dr. Coleman. Subject: Olivia's request. Maya, Olivia has asked if you would consider participating in a therapeutic family session before her review board next month. This would be different from your regular visits, a structured session focused on articulating boundaries and expectations for her potential transition to community living. Please let me know if this is something you're open to considering. There is no pressure either way, and your comfort level is the priority here. Regards, Dr. Coleman. I set the phone down and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. While considering the request. 3 years ago, the idea of participating in family therapy with Olivia would have seemed ludicrous, even dangerous. Now, it felt like a logical next step in a process that had been unfolding since that fateful wedding day. Not forgiveness without accountability, but healing with clear-eyed awareness. Not forgetting the past, but refusing to let it dictate the future. I picked up my phone and replied, I'm open to participating. Please send possible dates. The next morning, I arrived at the research center earlier than usual, mind clear after a night of surprisingly restful sleep. Instead of going directly to my office, I took the elevator to the rooftop garden we'd installed last year, a peaceful space where staff and patients could connect with nature amid the urban landscape. The sun was just rising, painting the city in soft gold light. I sat on a bench surrounded by herbs and native flowers, breathing in the earthy scents, listening to birds greeting the day. This moment of stillness had become an important ritual, grounding me before the intensity of work began. Thought I might find you here, Dr. Sharma said, appearing with 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to me and sat beside me. Big day ahead. I nodded, accepting the coffee gratefully. In 3 hours, we would be presenting our integrated treatment results to the National Institute of Mental Health, potentially securing funding that would expand access to our programs nationwide. I've been thinking about legacy, I said, watching a monarch butterfly land on a nearby milkweed plant. Not the Bennett legacy or even the company's, but the ripple effects of our choices. How responding to harm with healing instead of retaliation creates entirely different possibilities. Harriet nodded thoughtfully. When you first told me what Olivia and Vincent had done, I expected, maybe even hoped for, a different response from you. Righteous anger. Legal destruction. Making them pay. That was certainly an option, I acknowledged. and perhaps it would have been justified. But instead, you channeled everything into understanding the psychological patterns that drive such behavior, and developing treatments that address those root causes. She shook her head in admiration. That's true vision, Maya. Seeing beyond the immediate hurt to the larger opportunity for transformation. We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the city awaken below us. I received a letter. From Vincent yesterday, I said finally. From prison. Harriet's eyebrows rose in surprise. What did he want? To apologize, supposedly. But the language was all wrong, manipulative, self-serving, positioning himself as misunderstood. The same patterns, just wrapped in different packaging. Some people never develop the capacity for genuine insight, Harriet observed. That's what makes Olivia's journey so remarkable, I think. She had the courage to face herself honestly. To do the painful work of genuine change. I sipped my coffee. It doesn't erase what happened, but it creates the possibility of something new. Later that day, after the successful presentation to the NIM representatives, I found myself in an unexpected conversation with their lead researcher, Dr. Josephine Rivera, no relation to Detective Rivera, though the coincidence had made me smile. Your approach bridges gaps we've been struggling with for decades, she said as we toured the treatment facilities. The integration of pharmaceutical intervention with targeted cognitive therapy, all informed by trauma-aware protocols, it's revolutionary. It grew from personal experience, I admitted. Understanding how early patterns create vulnerability to both psychological distress and manipulation. Dr. Rivera nodded. The most powerful innovations often come from transforming our wounds into wisdom. The question is always whether we'll be defined by what happens to us, or by what we create from it. Her words stayed with me throughout the day, through meetings and lab work and administrative tasks. By evening, as I prepared to leave, I found myself drawn back to the rooftop garden, needing a moment of reflection before heading home. The city was transformed in twilight, buildings glowing with windows lit from within, the first stars appearing in the deepening blue above. I stood at the edge, hands resting on the railing, feeling the gentle evening breeze against my face. 3 years ago, I had stood at a different edge, the precipice of destruction, betrayed by those I should have been able to trust most. I could have fallen into bitterness, into retribution, into a life defined by that betrayal. Many would have understood, even encouraged such a response. Instead, I had chosen a different path, not out of naive forgiveness, but from a deeper understanding that responding to harm with more harm only perpetuates cycles of destruction. That true power lies not in defeating others, but in creating something meaningful from even our most painful experiences. My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Rivera, now a friend after all we'd been through. Heard about the NIM presentation. Congratulations. This work matters more than you know. Dinner next week to celebrate? I smiled, typing a quick acceptance. Another unexpected gift from the ordeal, connections with people I might never have met otherwise, relationships formed through adversity but sustained by genuine respect and care. As darkness fell completely, the garden lights activated automatically, casting a soft glow over the plants and paths. I gathered my things, ready to head home, but paused for one last moment of appreciation for this peaceful space created amid the urban intensity. Tomorrow would bring the family therapy session with Olivia and Dr. Coleman. Then meetings with Julian about his prevention program, which had proven to have real merit. Then continuing work on expanding our treatment protocols to reach more people suffering from the invisible wounds of psychological trauma and manipulation. The path forward wasn't perfect or without challenges. Healing rarely follows a straight line. Trust, once shattered, rebuilds slowly, with careful attention to both compassion and boundaries. Some days were harder than others, old fears occasionally resurfacing when triggered by a random memory or similarity. But each step forward was a choice, a deliberate decision to create rather than destroy, to understand rather than condemn, to transform pain into purpose. Not just for myself, but for all those who might benefit from what we were building from the ruins of betrayal. As I left the garden and headed toward the elevator, I caught my reflection in a glass door, straight shoulders, clear eyes, a quiet confidence that came not from avoiding darkness but from moving through it and emerging stronger, wiser, more authentically myself. The woman in that reflection wasn't defined by being a victim of betrayal or even a survivor of it. She was defined by what she had chosen to create in response: innovative treatments, meaningful connections, a life of purpose and impact. That, perhaps, was the most profound lesson of all, that our greatest power lies not in controlling what happens to us, but in choosing how we respond, what we build, who we become in the aftermath of both our triumphs and our tragedies. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.